back to the KnitHR's Pattern of Progress podcast. I'm Kathy Hernandez, your KnitHR consultant, and today we're diving into a topic that I'm always fascinated by, and that is how HR professionals like me and our guest today found our way into HR. As the title of the podcast indicates, accidental HR is a special journey that many of us go on. You choose HR sometimes, but sometimes it also chooses you. I've always been, let's say, a bit of a compliant personality. I'm the person who always returns the grocery cart, walks on the right side of the mall, and generally avoids the gray areas of life. But I've grown both personally and professionally, and I've learned when to embrace the gray and when to walk the line. And my journey in HR has been a big part of that learning curve. Today, our guest is a individual who I've had the pleasure of working with on and off for the last 8 years. She's a seasoned HR professional with over 10 years of diversified experience in HR. She's a certified professional in human resources and holds a certification in people and business leadership. She brings a high level of passion and expertise to her work, and she possesses a stellar record in building robust relationships with leaders, driving compliance efforts, and championing HR transformation projects. And I know this because I've had a first row seat to be able to see all of that. She's worked in both startup and Fortune 500 companies, and I don't want to share too much about her as I'm excited for her to share her own HR journey. So please help me give a warm welcome to my colleague, my friend, and the host of the newly released podcast, HR Telltales, Shawanda Taylor. Shawanda, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Hi, Kathy. I'm so excited to be here on KnitHR Consulting podcast. And so for me, it's exciting that we're both embarking on this venture. And I'm just excited to be here and also be your first guest.
Yes, of course. I mean, who else would it be? So thank you for joining me today. And before we jump into our topic, I'd love to hear a little bit about your new podcast. I know you just released your first episode. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my very own podcast is titled HR Telltales. And so, I'm just at a stage in life where I want to hone in on passion projects. So, what are the things that really bring me most joy? And so I launched HR Telltales as a way to discuss all things related to people and culture. From my point of view, obviously, as an HR professional, it's really an outlet, if you will. This podcast is just, again, my way of bringing some humor into the overlooked part of the human side of HR, as well as the workplace. And so it's really a heartfelt endeavor for me, and really want to bring a sense of connection, learning, and understanding, when we transform the way that we view and experience work. So yeah. I do have some great topics in store. We'll be excited to have guests joining me in the near future. Hopefully, again, I can get you on mine as well.
Maybe.
So super excited, and I hope that you and other listeners will tune in.
Yeah, and I already have. I've already listened to the first one. I listened to it on my journey to a friend's house yesterday to do my vision board, actually, for the year. So that was that was what I did on the way. So and it's you got to have humor, I think, in the roles that we have. So if you don't, then yes. I don't think we would survive. So gotta have a little bit of humor. So as you know, our topic today is accidental HR, journeys to the heart of HR. I thought it'd be great for us to share how we each have gone from point A to point B in our careers, with point A being the beginning and potentially as far away from HR as one might get, to point B landing us like right into the heart of HR, which is where we find ourselves today. So hopefully, that's you're prepared to kind of take us way back in your journey. Before we do that, I want to share a little bit about, my journey and how I even thought about this topic and why I thought it would be good for us to venture into today. As I've already noted, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you over the last 8 years. And when I think back thank you. And when I think back to where you were and where I was at the beginning of our paths crossing, it seems like so long ago and just like yesterday, all at the same time. Yeah, I know. It's like, it does. It seems like quite a long time ago, but yes, literally yesterday. But when we worked at Express together, I don't recall if it is a meeting if the meeting that I have in mind occurred before or after your arrival, but for the presence of that meeting, like where it was happening, I'm pretty sure it was at Express. So hopefully my brain isn't failing me here. But there was this HR meeting that I attended where it had the entire HR organization, which for Express was HR, benefits, compensation, L&D teams, and we all came together to meet our new EVP of HR, or at least that's how I remember it anyway. And during that meeting, either all or some of us shared how we found ourselves in HR, and it was such an amazing realization how many people had never really intended to go down the HR path, but yet here we all were. So yeah, so for fun, what was your first W-2 job? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, I don't recall that meeting, so it may have been, before my time, but I think that I would have loved to have been in a room to,
Yeah, it
to
was really
learn a
interesting.
little bit of more about the Express people and how they, got into HR. I'm sure
Yeah.
that definitely would have been, a great thing to have witnessed.
Yeah.
But my first actual W-2 job, was working as a cashier for Pet Supplies Plus.
Ah,
And I'm
okay.
not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a retail chain. When you think of
Mhm.
like PetSmart, it's very
Yeah.
similar. Not sure if it's a Midwest thing, being that I'm from Ohio, but
Mhm.
Pet Supplies Plus, it's a retail chain of U.S. made pet supplies. They sold like
Mhm.
live fish,
Oh, wow.
live
Yeah.
small pets, crickets, all that good stuff.
All
But the
the
funny
things.
thing the funny thing is I was 14 at the time, and I just didn't want to work in fast food. So all my friends had jobs like at McDonald's, and I didn't want to be seen. So I was like, I want to apply somewhere differently. So I ended up applying there. They hired me, and I almost quit on my second day of training
Oh
because
gosh.
someone purchased a tarantula, and I had to check them out. And I have a huge fear of spiders. I
Yeah.
still remember the interaction to this day. But yes, my first W-2 job was at Pet Supplies Plus. So yeah.
I mean, listen, I think there's something in common here, whether we like to admit it or not. It's retail. It was retail. And
Yes.
that'll come back around. That'll come back around. So for me, my first job was also in retail. And technically I
Nice.
that's when the retail bug hit me. I too was 14, working on a work permit. I just, wanted to get to work. But I worked as a sales associate at a retailer called Wieners of all names.
Oh my God.
And that's I always love to tell that story, especially in a room full of HR people, right? Because everybody's like,
Yes.
what? Yes, it was a retail clothing store in Houston, Texas. And I mean, they sold everything. I kind of equate it to a bit of a maybe a Kohl's, but really only clothing, if I had to think about it. But they had all the name
God.
brands, they had Guess, they had, all the things that were big at
Oh
that
my
time for
God.
us as teenagers. And so of course I wanted a discount, so
Oh my
I
gosh.
I worked there. But yeah, wieners of all things. And I'm
Wieners.
yes. So quite a story to tell, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Way to
but
lighten the mood, right?
yes, it always is a good little icebreaker. But yeah, when I look back at my career, I'm actually not surprised that I ended up in HR. I think I like to think that I half chose it and it half chose me. Like I said, I've always been a fairly compliant person. I mean, it's there doesn't tend to be a lot of gray. And when I look back at the jobs that I've held, I started out in terms of like corporate world in an administrative assistant role that then morphed into an accounts payable role, accounts receivable, and payroll, which payroll, as we know, is not just adjacent to HR.
My
It's
gosh. It's
it's
truly
quite
intertwined.
tied. Yes, it is. Depending on how large the business is, you might not touch it as
Mhm.
much. But in my experience, I've always had to be very intertwined with HR. But so yeah, after those roles, I then moved into what was called total quality management. And so in that space, there's a lot of rules and regulations and standards that you have to manage to. And so it really the truest same for accounting and payroll, right? There's little to no gray area when
Yep.
it comes to
Yep.
paying vendors, paying companies, paying employees. And when it came to total quality management, one of my primary roles was to audit the business, right, against all the procedures and the SOPs that we wrote. So did we do what we said we
Yes.
did? And so by the time I stepped into HR, my affinity for compliance was it was, not only just ingrained as me as a person, but like is ingrained in me professionally. And so I think about that like first HR role that I had and the exposure that it gave me, and like knowing what I know now, I realize what an education it truly was. Um, and listen, it was not all sunshine and roses. It was actually quite the opposite. I'm not going to lie.
I'm sure.
There were many challenges that I won't go into, but my time in that role certainly laid the foundation that I needed to go out into the world and progress my HR career. I'm curious, before we go a little bit deeper into some of the things that I did in HR, saying that like I'm a compliant person, does that resonate with you at all in terms of like how you sort of function in life and how you grew up?
Oh my goodness, no. For me.
You're like, no.
Um, for me, I think my journey into HR is it's a little different in a sense of, I come from a background of just being service oriented.
Mm,
Although I am more on the introverted side, I do enjoy interacting with people once I break that shell, and I enjoy like helping to support and kind of assisting where needed. So all in all, I knew I was going to wound up in a position that was going to allow me to be of support. And so
yeah.
really that is what tapped into my journey for HR. But my HR story in itself is a funny one that I am forever grateful for.
Yeah.
So I was actually working at a bank. And at
Mm,
the time, I was a bank teller, and things were going great. And then, unfortunately, there had just been a whole lot of bank robberies that were
oh
happening in
gosh.
the
Yeah.
area in which I was banking. And so
Yeah.
the branch that I was at, and I had a fear that our branch was going to be next. And
Mm.
so I, spoke to my
Reasonable fear.
manager. I spoke to my manager, they kind of understood the fear
Mm,
of it all for me. So I put in my immediate resignation.
mm.
And then I had ended up joining or signing up for temp agency Robert Half
Oh,
staffing
nice. Yeah.
because I was looking for a job that, I would be able to get hired at quickly. And I was willing to
Mm,
do, temp until something permanent came along. And so I ended up, getting a call back from Robert Half for a temp assignment at a nonprofit organization as an HR assistant. To cover just a 6 week medical leave for someone.
mhm.
And so when I joined, it was a two-person HR team. So as you know, I'm so used to just being a two-person or a very small
Yes.
HR atmosphere, which I love.
You
But
learn
getting
so
back to the
much. You can learn
right,
so much, right? Yeah.
so yes, so hear me
Yeah.
out, right? So this HR team, it was just the HR director and the assistant. And so when I came
Mhm.
in, I wasn't really trained on
Yeah.
anything. And the initial position was just for me to be administrative. So I was
Mm,
just handling like the recruiting, doing like the pre-hire task of fingerprinting people. And
uh,
I mean, at the time I was doing the ink fingerprinting. So that just goes to
right.
show a little bit of my age there until we finally moved over to the biometric fingerprinting side.
Mm,
I was doing those background checks, I was doing the education verification, and then I was coordinating the trainings and then passing out the certificates once people completed those trainings. And so, again, that's really what my 6 week span of time or my role at the
yeah.
time. But as I was approaching the ending part of the assignment, the HR director, wanted to continue to extend me. And
Mm,
unfortunately, and this was even after the person had returned from their leave, and unfortunately, there had been a lot of transition that happened at this organization
yeah.
that ultimately, led me to coming on full time as a permanent HR assistant. And I then was able to get exposure to other parts of
Mm,
HR and get hands on experience. So you think of benefits, payroll, compliance at the time,
all the
employee
things.
relations.
Yes.
So, I'm just going to put it out there and give a huge shout out to St. Vincent Family Center that is based in
Yes.
Columbus, Ohio. They offer, those youth behavioral services for children
Yeah.
and families. And, you know, it was an amazing team of individuals that I got to work with there. So, hey, Angie, Regina, and Paul, and they're still there to this day. But
That's
it's a
awesome.
huge
Yeah.
It's a huge reason why I'm an advocate for mental health and
Yep.
overall behavior health. But just to get back to things, I remained in the HR assistant role for about 4 years, and I was ultimately, ready for something new. So my mentor at the time, Jewel Hatchett, who had done some previous HR and business consulting for St. Vincent Family Center, had connected me with a recruiter for Ad
Oh,
Express,
nice.
where I got
Mhm.
to interview with you and Kelly Boone, and the rest is
Oh,
history,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
So,
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Yeah, because
right,
that is,
I
I
know,
want to dig back there.
I
But
know,
yeah,
but
that's like the path converged to
right,
bring you
but
to bring you to me. Yes, I love it.
But for me, I think, how I got started in HR and, my journey that led eventually to Express, it,
Yeah.
it really is what solidified my desire to continue to grow as
Hmm.
an HR professional and as well as in the retail space was, again, I was just being thrown into things, but I
Hmm.
enjoyed it and I learned so much and I was just like, yes, I can see myself,
Yes.
continuing to do that. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
how I got started.
Which I think is, so funny because I was researching, like, what are there statistics, right? Like on, how many
Yes.
people just fall into HR. And I certainly found a lot of articles, and we'll dig into that a little bit later. But I was even listening to the HR Besties podcast after I finished yours. I then moved on to theirs to catch up. And one of the things
Yes.
that they mentioned when I was listening to it was, most people that fall into HR, it's because like the tasks were just given to them, right? They might have been in admin or
Mhm.
they might have been in finance or whatever. And it was
Yes.
just like, oh, we need somebody to do this, go do this. And then, 2, 3 years later, you find yourself, running a whole HR department. And so I was like, that's exactly what I'm about to talk about. And when
Yes.
I think about the first HR job that I had, and it's very similar to yours, it's like you get all this exposure and you're just like, okay, like this is what I want to do. I think before
Mhm.
I landed in HR, I had quite I don't know what you want to call it, sort of HR exposure through management, like being a manager. So
Right.
I spent nearly 4 years as a service center manager, so in a call center type environment, but it was very
Yeah.
service oriented to customers. We were performing services for customers, but we supported both technicians and customers on this team that I had a team of 18, very large. I started out with 6, and then I had 8, and then I bumped all the way up to 18, and it was just as a people manager, you go on your own journey of like becoming educated in
Yes.
HR practices and all of the things
Mm.
that we coach on a daily basis. Recruiting, performance management, all the things. So,
Yes.
I felt like I had a really good education there, but I was pretty burnt out in that role. I worked 60 plus hours a week on a slow week.
Oh.
So when I transitioned into a role without direct reports, it was quite welcome, and that role happened to be HR. But this was also during a time when HR was, they're responsible for the holiday parties, and they told everybody what they could wear and what they couldn't wear. And
Right.
it was like we couldn't wear jeans except on the last Friday of the month. Like it was, when I think back to like, business casual is like the standard now. And business casual means jeans. Right?
Right.
Back then it did not mean jeans. We had a business casual dress code, but it did not mean jeans. I literally remember writing a dress code policy where women could not have more than a 3/4 length pant, like basically like
Oh my
capris.
goodness.
We had, and it was just
Wow.
amazing. And so I think about that, and then like kind of put that up against Express, where like if you could buy it at Express, you could wear it. That didn't always,
Right.
that didn't always necessarily quite go well. But yeah. So anyway, that role, I did things like HR, or I'm sorry, I did things like E-Verify when it first came out. So the company I worked for was a government contractor, and E-Verify was like just rolling out. And so we had to comply with it. It was mandatory. There was no, it wasn't optional for government contractors at the time. So,
Mhm.
that was just right out of the gate, something brand new, very compliance oriented, really helped you get your I-9 situation in check, because, you now had this extra level of support that you had to do to verify someone's employment. But I also did affirmative action and EEO, and
Nice.
that again is like just a whole different world. It's
Oh,
like pre DE and
right.
I, right? Like it
Seriously.
was.
Seriously.
And not only, it wasn't just writing policies, and making sure that your program supported both affirmative action and EEO, but like you had to prove it. So we had
Hmm.
to document our efforts. We had to, do the data analysis around the people that we had, the makeup of the people that we had, and where we had deficiencies. And so it really was pre DEI, but like all the
DEI.
good stuff, like it was the foundation that you and I always talk about. Like you just need a foundation, like that'll
Yes.
help you so much. You still have all these extra things you have to do, but just having a foundation will help you. So
You,
I
that's
really think that was
crazy.
big there. It was really big to learn that. You were going to say
I
something.
I was just gonna say, like, it's so crazy. You really hit it on the nail, and I never thought of it this way. Especially EEOC being the DEI pre
Yeah.
DEI, right? Because of
Yeah.
the reporting, the importance, that data that really kind of showed where the opportunities lie within an
Mhm.
organization when it came to diversity and things of
Yeah.
that nature. And I love that, and
It was an
I am
overt
that's gonna
calling
stick
yourself
with
out
me.
every year. Yeah, we
Yes,
literally called ourselves out
absolutely.
every year and said we don't have enough females in this segment. We don't have enough
Yes.
minorities, and that's of course the term that we used in the past, right? It was how the
Mhm.
EEOC reported. So if you didn't have, and it didn't even just stop there. It was like how many Asians, how many Black African American, how many
Yeah.
Native Americans. Like it was all of
And
their different buckets.
and as you know, like breaking it down, like who are in the managerial positions, you
Oh
know what I
yes.
mean?
Oh
And
yeah.
so
It
again,
made
it
you
was
do all the way up to the
yes,
executive. So
yes,
it was
yes.
really interesting to cut my teeth, if you will, on that aspect of it because it wasn't just like lip service. It was you had to document your interview processes differently. You had and to this day, if you work in a business that has government contracts, you still need to manage to those requirements. So it definitely was again one of those compliance check boxes that I had, e-verify, affirmative action, EEO. I trained managers on it. I trained them on how to, interview, how to make good notes when they're interviewing so they could really, express why they selected somebody. And it, at the end of the day, it's skill based, but like, you still want to make sure that they're being fair. And so I did that. I did performance management. I trained people on it. I rolled out new systems on it.
Oh
I
my
did
gosh.
succession planning. I wrote policies. I think I said it already. I did the annual holiday party, which, like, again, I don't, again, the HR Besties podcast was just talking about that. Why does HR have the holiday party? Like, and,
Right.
and I'm an introverted person as well, but I would always have to like speak at like this, thing at the holiday party. And we always did a formal affair. And so it was just like, oh, it was panic, I had to like introduce our general manager, I think was the title that he might have had, but it was always just like panic mode for me. But again, yeah, I was put in very uncomfortable situations that really served me later. But I led,
Right.
leadership training programs, onboarding, exit interviewing. I managed the HR dashboard. The list just, kind of can go on and on, but it was a whirlwind of learning and doing and a real hands-on introduction to all the
Wow.
facets of HR, including compensation. I had an individual who had been there for quite some time and he was an HR business partner, but he also was responsible for compensation. I helped with open enrollment, didn't necessarily like manage any of the stuff that like, you and I are used to managing now in terms of like costing and budgeting, all that kind of stuff, but like just the support of open enrollment, recruiting, and all the general HR administration. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing everything. Like that bar is going to be hard to like, you know,
Right.
hit with another job, but but after about 2.5 years, I just was like, man, okay, it's time for me to venture out of this little bubble. It's a 1,000 person organization. I had experience with Canadian law as well, and so it really really
Nice.
served me well. I've been with the company for 9 years, so it was hard to leave. And I know people that I worked with that are still there, and so people don't leave that company. It's a great
Oh my
company, and so
gosh.
I,
That's the
you know,
thing.
I will forever be grateful for the education that I got. But that's how I found my way into fashion, apparel retail at Express, which, at the time, and you can probably appreciate this, Express was a place that I shopped as a teenager. So it was like, oh my gosh, like I can have a job at one of these places. But yeah, I was there, I think only about a year before I met you. And here we are, 8 years, three companies, and many promotions for both of us
Right,
later.
right. No, seriously. And like, also huge shout out to Express because still to this day, at the time that I joined Express, I wasn't really wearing Express,
Yeah.
partly because I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But also at the time, I didn't really think it was my style because I was
Mm.
still finding my style.
Right.
But now you
Yeah.
can't tell me anything to the fact this is Express what
Thanks,
I
right.
have on right now. Like, I
Yeah.
love Express, and when I worked there and just remembering the times and all the little fun things we were able to take advantage of, like, yes, Express.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
you helped to establish this great rapport that I now
Mhm.
have with Kathy.
Yes, yes. I will always forever be indebted there as well. I mean, 6 years, nearly 6 years there, and it was. I feel like we were in the heyday. Obviously, we don't know anybody that works there right now, but
Right.
like for us, it was sort of a heyday of some HR folks, and we still talk to many of those people today. And so, and I've
Yes.
loved to watch all of their journeys grow as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that sounds like so much when I think about it. But for every HR role that I took after that, um, kind of going back to what we talked about in the beginning of like knowing when to walk in the gray and when to like stay on the line. Um,
Mhm.
all each one of my HR roles has helped me sort of dive into that a little bit further. I think we're always learning, right? And
Yes.
sort of what you can and what you can't do.
Yes.
But let's before we get into all of that, let's get into your journey a little bit more post St. Vincent's because it's like you said, that's
Yes.
where the bug bit you. And so
Yes.
that's I we already learned how you accidentally got into HR.
Yes.
But what made you stay? Did you choose it? Did it choose you? Again, like tell me all the
You
things, in
know,
terms of how you decided to keep going.
and it's so funny because obviously me outside of working, I'm very intuitive. I'm very, spiritual when like if I have a feeling or something just comes over
Mhm.
me, I listen and I allow it to
Yeah.
take me wherever it feels like taking me. And so when I again got my experience at St. Vincent Family Center within HR, I really felt as though it was my calling.
Yeah.
From the aspect of me still being in a role that allowed for me to be service oriented, but
Mhm.
also in a sense, whereas I feel as though my personality kind of helped, you know, turn things around of how people portrayed HR per se.
Mhm. Yeah.
They think HR just do the hiring, firing, and they're always mean and things of that nature. And my personality, I'm like this inside and outside the workplace.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, a positive person, but, can also um, tell you the real,
Yeah.
tell you the real,
Yeah.
but do so, coming from a place of kindness and empathy. So I would say HR for me was a little bit more of a calling as I continue to
Mhm.
get exposure to the different areas of the business.
Yeah.
And
And I'm going to
then
interrupt you
beyond,
there really quick. I would
oh,
always tell
yes.
people when I would be like, oh, wait till you meet Shwanda. She's the best. She's like the nicest person you'll ever meet. I always tell them that would always be like the thing that I would say about you because you are. You're just like so nice. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even think I like hit the bar there. Like that like that is something about your reputation that people are always, oh my God, she's so great. She's just so sweet and so
Thank
nice.
you.
And of course, kindness, I know that that is
Thank
big for
you,
you.
thank
Yeah.
you. And it's so funny because I feel as though even still when I'm having those tough,
Yeah.
difficult conversations with people, I, deliver the message, but also they're like, like, I hear you, Shawanda, because it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, here you have like this nice person, and it's like,
Right.
okay, she means real deal. Like I need to
Yeah.
get my stuff together.
Yes.
But after St. Vincent Family Center and really coming into Express again, that kind of immersed me a little bit more in a structured corporate style environment that I had not known before. And so
Yeah.
learning all the things that Express, stepping into the associate service center, whereas you're still doing HR, but it's from a call center
Yeah.
environment. And so my path and progression there allowed me to be in the trenches of being on the phones first,
Yeah.
delivering the HR responsibilities, and then eventually embarking on the senior HR shared service representative team lead, where I then got to dabble in helping to oversee people, do like monitoring, coaching people. That
Yeah.
really gave me my exposure of coaching, and then eventually leading me to become the supervisor of the department. And so I believe again with Express that allowed me to really kind of elevate
Yeah.
and stretch myself from being an individual contributor into being, a manager. And
Hmm.
so from that, overseeing a lot of people, a lot of
Yeah.
different personalities, it then kind of, led to my next venture of going into helping with the brick and mortar retail stores. So stepping off
Yeah.
into those next positions really allowed me to continue elevating myself and becoming a more strategic HR business partner.
Yeah.
And that is something that I don't take for granted, and definitely, want to thank you for being a part of that journey, which has really enriched me and helped me to figure out what it is that I want to continue to do and how I
Yeah.
continue to be a great HR partner for any business going forward.
Yeah. So, thinking about the fact that we have worked together for so long, one would think that like our experiences would be the same, but they're not, right? I think that,
Right.
we obviously having held different roles, and we got to spend, I don't know, at least a year apart, right? With you at
Yes.
Express and me somewhere else. But, I think that what's interesting is, as have gotten to see you grow in your roles, is just not just seeing you be a manager, but like seeing you become a leader. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious, what your how you would describe like your leadership journey, because even when you
Yes.
don't have direct reports, you're still a leader in the business, especially if you are coaching and giving feedback on performance and helping managers
Yes.
through tough conversations, right? They're looking to you for leadership. And so,
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about how it's felt to go from that like peer to, supervisor, manager, and really, again, just elevating to that leadership kind of space.
Yes. So, what's super funny to me about leadership, because first and foremost, I'll take a step back. I'm one where, yes, titles are a thing, but to me, like titles may not essentially be a necessity, because I'm more about like how are we treating
Mhm.
individuals and what are we doing. And so from a leader perspective, I would say that I've always been a leader, because I'm always, whether I'm supporting coworkers,
Mhm.
helping somewhere, because again, just being service oriented, it has allowed me to really take on the responsibility of helping people. And it was just something I
Mhm.
did on my own, more specifically stepping into HR and doing it from a leadership role.
Yeah.
I can say that it was an eye opener once you get exposure to being a manager yourself, and then you're leading another manager and how to lead their team in essence. And
Yeah.
so it really was a journey around me being able to establish relationships, first building the
Mhm.
trust, obviously, and establishing those relationships that allowed me to, be a supportive partner and
Mhm.
a coach, a mentor, if you
Mhm.
will, with regards to helping to have, coach people on performance management outside of me doing the direct coaching myself, but helping to equip
Yeah.
the manager with being able to carry out those responsibilities on their own. And then
Mhm.
also, as I was able to, get into rooms that I didn't necessarily imagine myself at the earlier stages of my HR
Yeah.
career being in, it allowed me to really get to know the senior leaders within the business, how they interact, how they communicated with people, how they made decisions, and allowed me to really be vocal and be able to speak up to have an input in those rooms,
Mhm.
as well as again allowing for my suggestions, ideas, and things of that nature to be taken into consideration. And it's
Yeah.
it's something that was a challenge, as you know, for me at first. But I think the more that I showed up as my authentic self, the
Mhm.
more people were appreciative of
Yeah.
what I was about, what I was wanting to do, and the place that I was coming from.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to really kind of put myself in a position to really be looked at as a leader,
Yeah.
even in times of uncertainty and
Mhm.
challenges and in not so
Yeah.
fun times. It really allowed me to just again just kind of be there to to vocalize who I was as a person, what I was
Hmm.
wanting to do, and the partnerships that I was
Yeah.
looking to establish.
Well, I think when you found your voice, you found your voice. Like,
Yes.
you showed up different, and it's
Yes.
in. So I think it's so empowering when you realize, okay, yeah, I like people are listening to me, and
Hmm.
I'm doing this right. And so I
Yes.
think the thing about leadership that I find so interesting is that we all have our own styles, but as HR folks, we have to help people find their style, flex into a different
Mhm.
style, and all of those kinds of things. And that always challenges me as a leader, right? Just
Yes.
myself, right? Because I'm trying to always help people, think differently. But I'm like, oh, but now I have to think differently sometimes too. And so
Yes.
I think it's great when you have a team, and you and some other folks that I've had report to me help me become a better leader, right? And it's because you have to get feedback as much as you give it. You have to
Yes.
invite it. So I thank you for that along the way. But yeah, I think it's such a journey in HR when you get to be on all fronts, right? And I think that that's
Hmm.
the unique thing about our journey, where it's very similar in that we were in startup, and living in
Yes.
startup is
Ooh.
it
Look,
is its
another
own
one.
it is its own thing. But again, it's like, but I love it. Like, I can't stay
Yes.
away. I can't stay away
I
from
wouldn't
it now.
change it.
So it's retail and it's startup. And so it's like
Yes.
retail, this fast paced monster. But
Hmm.
then you layer on startup on that, and it's just, I just love it. And so I do find it
Hmm.
hard to not be in that space. So now as an HR consultant, I'm still in that space. And I realize even more so now, it's like, okay, I love retail and e-commerce, but like, I think it's the startup thing that, sort of keeps it
Yes.
so interesting, because it's never
Yes.
really the same thing every day. It's just slightly,
Yes.
slightly different. You're also
Slightly
able
different.
to, sort of not reinvent the wheel. You're also able to leverage all of these things that you've done in the
Hmm.
past and
Hmm.
bring them into wherever you are, but like just
Hmm.
elevate it even more as another iteration, right, of the
Yeah.
things. And we've both had that experience together, right? So
Yeah. And,
yeah.
even just to add on to that, I think what's so fascinating about the HR field is the fact that, again, like businesses grow, times are changing. Literally, how HR functioned, years ago isn't the same way in which it's functioning
Mhm.
now, and it's not going to be the same way in the
Yeah.
future. And it's so, to me, like it's so enlightening, and I'm always sitting here like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for what's next. The future
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
HR in itself is what's super intriguing for me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to be a part of the
Yeah.
evolution of
Yeah.
HR, and be a part of helping a company evolve as well. And so I don't know, I do think that HR again is my calling, and I love now seeing a lot of people come into the field, a lot of people that really are pushing for the change that we are wanting to see and what we've been
Yeah.
trying to strive for in previous years when it comes to HR truly being strategic partners. And so it's exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good segue into the next topic that I wanted to cover, which was, again, the accidental nature of HR careers, right? I mentioned I was trying to find some statistics about, what's the percentage of people that just kind of fall into HR, and that's not necessarily really out there. But, I did find that the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that HR is going to grow by 6% over the next 10 years. And this was, their 2022 data. But they indicate that that's faster in average. And the average growth rate for all occupations is only about 3%. So it's like double what most other occupations will grow by. And so,
Yeah.
in 2022, there were 874,500 HR jobs. And based on the projected growth, that means there are going to be another 51,400 that will enter the field of HR in the next 10 years. And
Wow.
when you think about the accidental nature of it, right? Like how many people today, right now, are, doing something that's somewhat adjacent to HR, right? Whether it's L&D that doesn't belong in HR, where their organization lives, and they're going to find their way over
Hmm.
into HR doing an HR business partner role or something like
Right.
that, right? Like those are the kinds of things that I think about. But so again, as I was looking for these statistics, I found an article. Literally, I googled like percentage of people who fall into HR. I think, something very, very simple. And I read an article on Lattice from like 2020 that spotlighted an HR director at Career Plug. And I don't know what that company is all about, but she was quoted as saying two things that totally resonated with me for our topic today. And that is, number one, human resources will never be boring because humans are never boring. I
Hell
mean,
no.
I
It's
was like,
never,
that's it right
never.
there. They're never boring. And I was like, that's like the best quote I think I've ever heard. But then she also said HR is often painted as this black and white role. And this kind of goes back to like, me talking about being very compliant, like, and it's not always black and white in HR, but she said HR is often painted as a black and white role, but it's actually a rainbow. It requires not a reading of the rules, but an interpretation and judgment and connection. And you're going to have a lot of fun, right? That was her quote. And I love that. I was like, that is
Love that. Yes.
100% true.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. The article also referenced that a large number of her peers that literally, quote unquote, accidentally ended up in the field. So I was
Not
like,
surprised.
literally
Not
what we're talking
surprised.
about. So again, I found plenty of articles about that. There was even an article from workforce.com from 2018 that shared 5 paths of falling into HR that I thought I could share and we could kind of talk about.
Yeah.
Of course, they start out by saying, raise your hand if you grew up dreaming of a career in HR. Like, no one. Of course not.
Yeah.
Like, and I'd say today maybe a little bit different. I think, now they have degree programs around HR.
Yes.
But even like
Yes.
when I took my master's degree, I had to pick like organizational leadership, right? So it was either psychology or organizational, something business management that then took you to HR back in the day. And now they have HR, management programs. But so anyway, what the 5 paths that were identified were: one, I started at the bottom, now I'm here. Right. So maybe you started out as an HR coordinator or recruiting coordinator or something like that.
Oh my God.
Really the front end. Then there's something that you kind of said, which is, I'm a people person. I'm an introvert, but you love helping people, right? And so maybe a people person. Or number 3, I got dropped into HR on an interim basis and never left. That might also be you.
So, yeah, I was gonna say. So I guess I'm like a little bit split there.
Yeah. The other one, number 4, was I was good at a specialty related to HR and ended up running the whole HR show. And so that's, again, could be somebody who's HR adjacent and ends up, kind of doing everything. And then the last one, I failed at another job at my company and they moved me into HR, so they didn't have to fire me. I was like, I mean, back in the day, they did. They used to just sort of put people where they thought they could fit.
Sure, because anybody can do HR. That was the thing.
Yeah, right? I actually read something. I don't know if it was on LinkedIn this morning or on Instagram. I was, doing my social media morning update this morning, and again, I don't know where it was, but it was like, is there any other field where everyone thinks they can do the job except HR? And then somebody said marketing. And then it was like, marketing and HR. Everybody thinks they can do marketing and HR. And it actually takes special people to do special jobs. And I always say that. I say that to like my daycare providers who, help me be able to work a full-time job, right? I tell them, I walk in with a room full of screaming kids and I'm like, special people to do special jobs.
No, seriously, because my saying, and I stand by this always, is common sense is not so common, at the end of the day. So again, it definitely takes special people to do special jobs, especially in HR.
HR, yes. So again, another good segue, I think unintentionally, but a good segue to the different areas within HR, recruiting, training, employee relations. I always say that I'm a very good recruiter, but I don't love it. I don't like it. Right. And I know that I'm good at it, but man, it's a killer sometimes. And I look for those folks when I'm hiring for recruiters that are just like, they love it. Right. Like I don't have that in me, but I can do it. I've scaled a company from 1 to 60 and I probably hired the first 30 myself, but it's a lot. It takes a lot. And I think, when you break down all the different roles, and that's part of what you and I both got to do, is like, because we've done this more operational, sort of approach to HR, we've really got to touch everything again, comp, ben, everything.
Yes. Yes, yes,
But
yes.
especially associate relations, training, building it, delivering it, it doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
I'm curious what, your preferred area of interest is, if you had to pick one. And do you thrive in some more than others? For example, again, I use the recruiter, but also, and I really hate to say this, but like, we both lived in this DE&I space for a really long time that
Mhm.
was like so hard, like during the time that we were going through. But like, again, it takes really special people to be able to manage that emotional work that goes along with that type of role every single day, because it's a different type of emotional work. And so I know I'm not cut
Yeah.
out to be the best person to do that either, but I'm not afraid to admit it, right? I put it
Yeah.
in the category of know enough to be dangerous, and I'm a great supporter, but I know that I'm not necessarily the one to be driving and creating all of the programs all of the time when it comes to that. So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about, where your favorite spaces are.
My favorite spaces within HR, or what I would like to say is like my niche, when you think of people and culture, it really is talent management and
Mm,
all that
yeah.
it entails, because I truly feel wholeheartedly that, again, like my calling is to help shape careers,
Mhm.
elevate teams, contribute to the success of a company.
Yeah.
So I do believe that talent management, majority of what that entails is included in that, and it's the things that I
Yeah.
enjoy. So you think of employee development,
Yeah.
employee engagement, succession planning, career pathing, performance management, helping to design onboarding programs, or developing efficient, and inclusive hiring processes. Like those
Yeah.
those are things that I enjoy. And so I would say, under the umbrella of like my preferred area as it relates to HR, would fall within that realm. But
Yeah.
I also can relate to what you talked about recruiting.
Mm.
Recruiting. Can I do
Which
it?
you're
Yes.
so
Am
great
I
at.
good at it? Yes.
You're
I'm
amazing at
I'm
it. Yeah.
I'm good at it. Yes. But do I prefer to do it? No.
No.
I would
Yeah.
rather not do it, but I will
Yeah.
be, because again, I just think that, just being the face of the company, or the
Mhm.
be the be the example, or the first
Mhm.
initial interaction that a person has with the company
Yeah.
is important. And if
Mhm.
I need to be that representative,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? I will.
Yeah.
But I would prefer not to do
Yeah.
recruiting.
Yeah. But I will say, I'm going to give us both some credit here. So, I do think that we go out of the way, and this is certainly a problem that everyone is sharing so much about on LinkedIn these days, and that is like the candidate experience, and like making sure that you close the loop, and you really get back to people, and I
Yes.
always try to do that. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect or you're perfect and people haven't fallen through the cracks, but I would
Right.
hope that 99.5% of the time, or 99.9% of the time, that we've always tried to make sure that we close the loop with folks. And I think that we've always gotten great feedback about people's candidate experience. And I love that,
Okay.
because even though we don't pride ourselves on being like, recruited being our passion, we do believe
Right.
in like doing a great job of it. And I think the one thing that I actually do enjoy most about the recruiting process is just being able to tell someone that we're offering them a job. That's sort of like the thing that I
Yes.
love the most, because people are looking for roles for a
Yep.
reason, and sometimes it is just
Yep.
to have a job, and other times it's because they're really trying to grow their career. So I'm always
Yes.
very happy to be able to give people offers, and then see them kind
Yes.
of then come into the company and grow from there. And so
Yes.
that will never get old. That part will never get old.
Right.
It's the back
Right.
to back to back. That's the whole part. That's the hard part.
Yeah,
But
and that's the thing, is like, again, like it may not be my preferred part of
yeah,
HR, but it's something that, I can always keep in my back pocket, as I can do
yeah,
it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah,
I think that
yeah.
it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
How
even
about
in
how
the
about
course
you?
of yeah, I was gonna say, even in the course of my consulting work, like I plan to do recruiting at some
Yeah.
point, but again, it won't be the first thing that I do for for
Yeah.
folks. But
Right.
But for me, okay, so what do I enjoy the most? I think that's the thing that I've learned most about myself is that I really like the variety. I feel like when I lack the
Yes.
variety in my week of being able to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it does tend to sort of I don't know if stress is the right word, but it definitely like just layers on this little bit of I feel like I'm not getting anything done,
Yes,
and
stagnant.
sometimes in the roles that I've have all I do is talk to people all day every day for 5 days, and I don't necessarily get any project work done or things like that, and you know that all too well. When we have our own touch bases, I would be like, oh gosh, I still have not gotten to that, just so you know. But I think that as I'm transitioning into, and I have fully transitioned into consulting, that's what I enjoy the most is this variety. And I still have this engagement with people. I'm still having calls, Zoom calls, in person, meetings from time to time. I got to
Mhm.
to visit a client last week. And so but then I have a block of time where I get to go work on a project. I get to go do a thing and deliver a
Yeah.
deliver a thing, right? And
Yeah.
being able to have that balance, and it's still not perfect, but being able to have that be more balanced, I think is great. But I also think as I'm transitioning here, I do love the coaching aspect. I really enjoy, and I'm even helping, people that aren't in the business that I support, right? Just from a one-on-one
Mhm.
standpoint, they're
Yeah.
looking for their next role and just helping coach them through that. Like, is it okay to email the company? It's been a week. What do I say? Just helping out with
Yeah.
things like that, or just helping them stay confident in their interview journeys. But I am finding a lot of pleasure out of that, but also just balance, I think, is probably the key there.
Yeah.
Balancing
Yeah.
all the
And
things.
it's again like both of us, are very similar in the fact that, we've been in a role that has been in roles that's given us exposure to all
Mhm.
parts, of
Yeah.
HR. And that is something that I do not take for granted because there's a lot of people that are, I hate to say it, but like, one show ponies,
Yeah.
that saying. But I do believe that being able to have had that experience where I'm at right now within my career and just personal life, it really allowed me to really take a step back and think about
Yeah.
what are the parts of the job that bring me the most joy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it really helped me to narrow down, the areas that I enjoy doing so much and that I would prefer, to do,
Mhm.
long term going forward. But as always, I'm going to continue to
Yeah.
dabble in everything.
Yeah.
But I do really enjoy those aspects
Mhm.
of HR.
Yeah,
So
but even to your comment about one show pony, I can't remember the last time I met somebody who just only did one thing. Like, I
right,
think that's
it's
the
been a long time ago, right?
it's like I don't feel like
Everybody.
that exists anymore. And even folks who are in recruiting roles, like they're responsible for the whole candidate experience, sometimes taking them all the way up through to onboarding. And
Yeah,
they can't just only think about just staffing, right? They have to think about so many
yeah,
other things. And there's assessments, and just it's just such an interesting
yeah,
space that we're in, that is just evolved so much, where I think before,
yeah.
yeah, you might have somebody who did the same thing
Yep,
day in and day out, but it's not likely anymore. Not
yep,
likely.
yep.
um
And it,
yeah, so it'll keep evolving, as you said, and we'll be
yes.
here for that. So I think that brings us, kind of to the end of what I intended for us to talk about today. Is there anything that you'd like to add, or kind of, as if you think about everything we talked about today, that, like, anything that resonates that you want to just reiterate?
For me, I believe that all that we talked about today was just simply a reminder for me
Mhm.
around my path, into HR, of how I started out up to where I am today. And it was very refreshing, to
Yeah.
be able to talk about that, because that isn't something I believe that has happened, within my life personally. And one thing that truly does stand out, and I think will forever stand out, is the simple fact that HR is a lot of things. And it truly is special with
Mhm.
regards to the place and I would say the importance in which we have when
Yeah.
it comes to an organization, that I am, again, just in hopes of what I'm seeing now,
Yeah.
that companies will really, tap into their HR leaders and allow them to, again, be a part of truly be strategic partners,
Yeah.
from a leadership perspective to help elevate their businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's happening more and more. It's happened at the companies that we've worked for. We've seen it evolve even since we've been there. And
Yes.
I'm seeing it as a consultant that, there's definitely a need, and people are starting to realize the full value. Now there's still plenty of education to be done, but
Right.
there's still there's still a full package that HR brings. And so I, encourage everyone to continue, checking in with us here at Patterns of Progress, but also to visit Shawanda's podcast, HR Tales, so you can hear a little bit more about, the human side of HR, like you said, and also the humorous side, because there's a lot of that. I'm getting a huge kick out of the HR Besties podcast. Like, they just like crack me up, and I feel like,
They do. I listen to
oh,
them as well. They're funny.
I'm like, all the things they talk about, it's like, yes, yes, yes.
No, seriously.
Again, it's still fun. I think one of the ladies says that HR are masochists, because even though some days you have a really like horrible, horrible like day experience, but you come back for more, and
No.
that's okay.
And that's the thing, is like we know that it's not always rainbows and sunshines. We've had our fair share of
Yes,
shenanigans.
yes,
But
yes.
it's funny to like hear it from other people's perspective,
Yeah.
but you can relate to it. You're like,
Yes,
yes,
yeah, because too
yes.
often we live in our own little bubble, and we're just like,
Yep.
oh yeah, this is not happening anywhere else, but it is. It's
It
happening
is.
everywhere.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, I want to again thank you for joining me
Thank
today and helping
you.
me in my next journey. And I say all the time that I've hired you what 4 times. I'd hire you again, but like, no, I want to see what you're going to go off and do, because I know you're going to do amazing things. And
Thank
we'll
you.
we'll still have our, we're still going to have our check-ins, because at this point in my life, I don't know how I can. It's been 8 years. How do I go another week
Right? How
without
it just
having a
become
touch base?
non-existent.
Yes. It's too hard. So thank you again for
Yes.
taking time to spend with me on this today. And again,
Yes, thanks for
everybody check
having me.
out HR Telltales, and watch Shawanda as she grows in her journey, and check us both out on LinkedIn. And please feel free to submit any questions or comments that resonate with you, and maybe tell us a little bit about how you accidentally fell into HR. So can't wait to hopefully hear some folks' journeys as well, even if it's just those that might reach out directly. So thank you
Right.
again, and have a great rest of the day.
Right.